took forever for me to wrap my head around this happened, but it does happen, and it happens to good people, and
Mm-hmm.
it happens to normal people, and it happens. And it doesn't mean you're dumb, and it doesn't mean that you're naive. It doesn't mean that.
Yes.
It can
Yes.
happen to anyone given the right set of circumstances.
Hi there. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Hecate, and this is Finding Okay, a healing podcast for survivors of sexual assault and any and all abuse. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Thiel. Kelly is an accomplished voice actress, author, speaker, consultant, and the driving force behind her new platform, Be Glorious. Kelly was a member of the NXIVM cult, and after exiting, she appeared in the critically acclaimed documentary, Seduced. She is set to release her first book in January 2022, Unapologetically Glorious. She has taken her power back and is helping others to do the same. Trigger and content warnings for this episode include the following: trauma, abuse, cults, slavery, and spirituality. Please check in with yourself and make sure you're all right to continue. So, my first question is, are you okay?
I am okay right now. Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm a little nervous, and as I always am with podcasts. But you're wonderful, so I'm actually feeling quite at ease. And yes,
Oh, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. And I would love to hear a compliment that you've received and that you've never forgotten.
Now, this one was interesting. It's interesting. The reason I haven't forgotten it because I didn't exactly know what it meant, but I was out shopping a few weeks ago, and I purchased something, and the stores only had a few people in because of COVID. And so I was just chatting with the other people in the store, and I checked out, and the sales gal walked me to the door, and she said, we were talking behind the desk, and she said, "You remind us of Princess Diana." And I said,
Wow.
"Really?" And she said, "Your energy is like Princess Diana." And I thought, well,
Wow.
thank you. And then I left, and I'm thinking, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going to make it mean that she was kind and compassionate and empathetic. And so, yes, I will take that as a compliment because I am working toward that. I'm working on that. So that was a compliment that I couldn't forget because I wasn't really sure what it meant.
That's
So,
that's a very intense thing to say. And there are so many ways that you could take that. I think the way you interpreted it is I think probably the way it was meant. I think
I think, I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah, I hope so. She was really sweet. The sales girl was very sweet when she walked me out to the door. And yeah, so that would be the one. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I know.
My goodness. And what is your favorite color and what do you associate with it?
Oh, I love the color yellow. I never really wear yellow, but I love the color yellow because it's warm and bright, and to me, it represents the sun and the
Hmm.
energy that comes from the sun that we all need to live, and it represents joy and happiness and little smiley face.
I love that. I love that. You do actually have a warmth about you, so that yellow, like I get like a strong yellow energy from
Oh,
you.
you
That's
do.
lovely. Yeah. And if I had to summon you in a ritual, what 5 things would I need to place as offerings at each point of the pentacle on the floor?
I think um, at the top of the pentacle, I believe would be water, something to do with water. So,
Mhm.
because water is so important to me and cleansing myself, my physical body, but also my emotions. And I love being around water. I think to the right of that would be a pen because I am a writer,
Mm.
and writing to me is so important. Straight across over to the left, I would say I would put my books. all my literature books and all my spiritual books and all of my historical books, because those are so important. And at the bottom of the pentacle, I would put, on the right, I would put something representing Gaia, earth, nature, trees, birds, animals. That would be on the right. And on the other side would be my faith. On the left would be faith, anything to do with faith and spirituality and connectedness to other human beings, really, is what that would be. So something that represent me being human and connecting to other humans through faith and understanding.
I love that. I love that. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what are 3 essentials to your self-care?
Okay, I'll only give you 3. So 3 would be baths, getting in water. A bath is a huge essential for me. Also, yoga and qigong. That's another really important, just the physical part. And I think the last one would probably be a quiet space for me to meditate, to think, to read, to be alone with my thoughts, but just a quiet space. That could be anywhere.
Yeah, that's incredibly important to me too. Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing those. Those are really beautiful.
Well, thank you for asking. It's nice to think about those things once in a while, kind of grounding and reaffirming.
Yeah. And I always love hearing what's helping other people and what's supporting other people. And sometimes it's things that are very unexpected, and I love knowing that people who are listening might be getting new ideas too, and helping them support themselves. But is it okay if I shift gears towards some heavier stuff at this point and ask you
Absolutely.
about some stuff from the past?
Mm-hmm.
So, what was your experience within NXIVM, and what exactly is your story for people who don't know who you are?
So I live in Orange County, California, and I have 4 children, and I have been a seeker for as long as I can remember. And I have done many things. I've traveled to the Philippines to work with psychic surgeons. I've traveled through Tibet, looking at all the temples and looking at the history of Tibet, working with some of the monks. And I was fortunate enough to be able to meet the Dalai Lama at one point when in California. I have basically read pretty much every book out there and worked with so many shamans and healers. I've done a lot in my search. And I finally got to this place where I would feel a little better, like feel a little closer to okay, and then not, and feel like, okay, I need to find the next thing. And so I was at this point in my life where I was feeling very not okay. And along came an introduction to an organization that was a human potential organization geared to help people work through their emotional problems, become more enlightened. And I thought, okay, well, I haven't tried this. And this just seems right up my alley. And so I signed up for the classes, and the classes were really great. I have to say, it wouldn't attract people to it if the curriculum wasn't great. So I really enjoyed that. I loved it so much, and I was really starting to feel good. I really felt like I was making progress. And so I just fell in love with the curriculum. I became a coach, and I became part of the community of NXIVM. And as many people probably know from the news, NXIVM had a lot of issues. I come to find out later, had a lot of issues around suing people and controlling people and doing a lot of things that I didn't know about at the time. And then there was an organization within the organization called DOS. And it was basically Keith Raniere, who had started this company, this organization, had set up a first line of sex slaves, and they were to recruit other women into this organization. And I was recruited into the organization. I was being told that it was a group of women who were all trying to be kick-ass, more accountable, more measurable women in the world to do some really great things. And I was told by someone in the organization that I really admired that I would be a great fit. And so I thought, okay, this sounds like, this could be help me on my path through NXIVM, becoming a coach and a proctor and things like that. And then I was asked for collateral. And at that point, I was already indoctrinated into this system of sort of stop. I wasn't asking as many questions as I should. And I was going with the program, and I wanted to be part of the community, didn't want to push any buttons. And I was definitely indoctrinated. But when that collateral word came up, I had to pause, and my whole body went off. And so I avoided this person for quite some time. And then eventually it all came out. Well, not quite some time, just a couple of weeks. And then it all came out about what was going on. So I was able to avoid becoming branded and being in this group called DOS by a couple of weeks. And myself saying that collateral is not the right way to go.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you had that instinct and that you were able to listen to that feeling. And wow. I did watch the documentary, and I was just really overwhelmed by your story of being able to listen to your gut. And I'm so thankful that you had that alarm go off and that you were able to listen to it. Yeah. And thank you
It
for
did teach
talking
me
about
a
that.
lot because I had relied on that instinct most of my life, like most people. But that instinct had been really repressed through being in the organization. We were told, intuition isn't scientific, so it doesn't really mean anything. So I had really suppressed it. So when that came up through my body, I started to repress it again, because I didn't want to. But the one thing I learned from all of this was never allow that to happen. Your body knows the answer. Like, we know the answer, and we need to listen. And that was the biggest takeaway for me in this whole experience that I had. It was huge.
In the organization that I was mentioning earlier, which that my sister was deeper into, which she identifies as a cult, and it was as I was watching the documentary, I was struck by how similar some of the courses and some of the layouts of things was, and that was quite alarming to see. But I was really struck by this memory that I had of my experience in there, which was we were separated into groups, and we would talk about, we would have questions posed to us, we would talk about various things. And something that was really specifically talked about at one point was that it was the kind of a demonization of fear or discomfort. And it was constantly put to us that you need to lean into discomfort because that's where the growth happens. And fear, being talked about as primitive, as kind of this, kind of lizard brain kind of response, and that we need to move past that, and that if you're fearing something or you're feeling uncomfortable, that's actually not enlightened, and that in order to be a more enlightened individual, that you need to move into that feeling, that you need to move into the discomfort and ignore that. And I actually remember saying, and I was approaching it from someone who already had PTSD, already had a history of abuse. And I remember saying in this group, hey, I mean, there's kind of another side to that, isn't there? Because fear keeps us alive and it keeps us safe sometimes. Yes, I understand what you're saying, but also it can be our friends, and it's very important. It helps us with boundaries. And that was validated and then completely ignored and shut down. And I just, that indoctrination process of teaching you to ignore those instincts and to lean into discomfort, and
it's
that
very
can be
similar
very bad.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened within NXIVM. And it was all about, and what was used against me was that everyone would say to me, you're just entitled. you're just an entitled princess. And I didn't want it to be, I don't want to be entitled. I don't want to seem entitled. So that to me was sort of my little trigger. And so in order to show that I wasn't entitled, I dug deeper into the discomfort, saying, well, I can handle this discomfort. And they were pushing the discomfort and saying, the more, if you're comfort driven, then you're not growing. And so I would go further into the discomfort and try to prove myself. And that's where it got really tricky with the intuition, because I was suppressing it in trying to become less entitled and less comfort driven. Big problem, right? There's nothing wrong with being comfortable sometimes, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, a lot of things they were telling me that I was, but I believed that it was because I wanted this thing that I thought they were going to help me with, which was enlightenment. I thought they all had it and I really wanted it, and I was going to do anything to get it. I wanted to be a better person. And the purpose of the organization was a humanitarian ideology to help the world. But we had to fix ourselves. So damn tootin', I'm going to fix myself. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Kind of find buttons with individuals and keep pushing it. Mm-hmm. And yeah. So do you identify as having experienced brainwashing?
Yes, I definitely. So when I got out of the cult, I was kind of told by some, deprogrammers and people like that they don't really use the word brainwashing so much as indoctrination. So I think it's kind of the same thing. Indoctrination is I guess what you would probably call brainwashing. So yes, I experienced that very much. And it was a slow drip. It didn't happen overnight. And it's a slow drip to let go of it as well. It's a belief system that needs to be broken if you decide that it's not working for you, then it needs to be broken. So a belief system is built over time. And there was a lot of logic around this belief system that kind of made sense given certain things. So yes, I totally understand when people do things that are outside of their comfort zone or go against themselves because they have been brainwashed or are indoctrinated. I understand because I've been there.
And I had a listener question that was specifically about your experience with EM and about the deprogramming. If you've had to kind of like deprogram yourself or rewire your brain after having that experience specifically.
Not specifically after the EM. I was fortunate enough to all of the EMs for me seemed to either not work or sort of work, but didn't seem to damage me. They weren't taking me down. I have to really think back on that one. There may have been some in there that probably were going against myself. But for the deprogramming part, that didn't come until quite after I got out, when I was able to contact the right people to help me. So the EMs, in my opinion, were being administered by people who really had no education going into the trauma that people had experienced and bringing it back up. They were not experienced. They didn't have the education to be doing that type of thing. So people were hurt. I didn't realize it at the time, although looking back, yes, I would say that people were definitely hurt because it was out of their league. Yeah. They were out of their league.
I actually had an extremely strong response to just watching the documentary, where they had video footage and audio of someone kind of, and I'm not going to repeat it because I don't want to trigger you or anyone else, but basically saying the words to try to elicit someone or ask someone to go into that experience, to go into a trauma or a very dark experience, to lead them there in a kind of like reliving kind of thing. And as I was watching this, I had this very visceral reaction to it, to having that asked of me. And it was strong enough that actually I spoke out loud as I was watching this on the TV and said out loud, I do not consent. I do not consent to this experience, and I refuse.
Good for
And
you.
it was, but it really made it very clear to me how easily
Mhm.
uh, that could be extremely damaging for certain individuals, and it was very easy for me to understand how some people, I mean, there were some people that had psychotic breaks, um,
Yes. Yes.
with those with the EMs and such, and it's yeah,
And
they mm,
the someone was talking to me. I cannot recall the conversation totally, but we were talking about the branding ceremony and how I felt like I might. I don't think I could have gone through with it. I don't know for sure because it didn't happen to me, so I don't know for sure. But this person was saying that sometimes when you're in the door or in a chair and you're already this far in, it's really hard to say no. So like with an EM, same thing. You're in a group, you're already in the group, you're in the door, you're under the roof, and this is happening. And sometimes, and I write about this in my book, sometimes it's hard to say no, because we believe we have to choose. And in my book, I talk about, sometimes no choice is the best choice, right? It means we always say that no choice is still a choice. It is. But sometimes, especially in a case like this, no choice just being like is a good choice. And I don't know if everybody knows that because a lot of people can't say no. It's hard for them to say no. So that was one thing I really learned because that's what happened to me when I was being asking for collateral. I didn't give an answer. I just made no choice and kind of hopefully it would just go away. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to handle all things, but there comes time sometimes when that needs to happen that way.
yeah, that's true. And yeah, thank you for talking about that.
I hope
It's
that
a
made
tricky
sense.
thing. It did. And as you say, it's not always the right decision, but sometimes it is absolutely the right decision and can
Mhm.
really really save you from having things get a lot worse. Um, and it's just sometimes you get lucky. Uh, sometimes you might have an intuition about, like, I think this is one of those situations where not making a decision is the best decision. And sometimes maybe you come to that more out of a sort of a feeling of paralysis or fear, and it ends up being
Right.
the absolute best thing that could have happened to you. And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, because saying no sometimes can be difficult when you're feeling pressure from around or peer pressure or just I'm already here, whoa. But I think that's one thing that I've learned now to be able to say no when I'm uncomfortable about anything and to use my voice. And I think that's a really great lesson, especially for younger people to start learning now how to say no. It's okay to say no. You can always say yes later, but say
Yeah.
no. Time. Think about it.
I wish especially that were more present in the way that we raise people who are assigned female at birth, women,
Mhm.
because it's yeah, the focus, growing up as a femme person, the focus on always being polite, um,
Mhm.
has really backfired in my life
Mhm.
in a lot of very alarming ways. And I agree. And you don't and I mean, the belief too, like this insidious belief that if I say no, I'm rude, is not true, and really really seriously messed up. And that's certainly
Mhm.
a message that I got growing up. And yeah. Oh, I had a couple more questions from another cult survivor, who wanted to know, what did the cult promise you?
So the cult promised to help me reach my human potential. And this is an interesting question because it was all about helping each person become the best version of themselves spiritually, physically, emotionally, so that they could help change the world on some level. So that was the mission. For me personally, this is kind of interesting, but I believe that if I could reach enlightenment, that I would be above criticism, judgment, all the painful things that I and everyone experiences in their life. I thought if I could just get to this place, like maybe like the Dalai Lama, if I could get to this place where it didn't matter anymore. I was so enlightened that nothing could hurt me anymore. So in some ways, enlightenment to me was about being perfect. It was about perfection, reaching perfection in order to stay safe. But as was pointed out to me by a therapist, my need for perfection actually put me into danger, which is a very huge revelation for me when I thought about it. What does perfection cause you or drive you to do? Well, for me, it drove me to basically join an organization that I didn't use a lot of critical thinking skills around it. I just wanted it so badly that I allowed myself to get indoctrinated into their system.
Yeah. And what did the cult take from you, if you feel like it took something?
Well, that's a great question. What it took from me for a little while was my power, or actually, I gave my power away. And I gave it away while I was in the cult, and I reclaimed it coming out. But that's in my book, and now that's a whole how to reclaim that. But that would be what happened, and I am grateful on some levels that happened, because to experience having given your power away is huge when you realize what happened, and the reclaiming of it is an absolute gift.
Can you talk to me about how you exited, how you left?
Yes. So there was no moment where I just left. It was a slow process. I was, as I told you before, I was being recruited into DOS. I had kind of I kind of started pushing this away because I didn't know what to do. My body was going off. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know how to say yes, and I didn't know how to say no. Didn't want to do either one of those. And so I was given someone called me from Canada and said, Kelly, you need to look at this link that I'm going to send to you. Keith Raniere has started branding slaves. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I thought she'd lost it. I really did.
Those were some serious, intense words that were strung together. It
Oh,
must have been very alarming to hear them.
I was sitting down and I couldn't process it. I was like, what are you talking about? So she sent me the link. She said, whatever you do, don't tell anyone I've sent this to you. And I said, why? She goes, because they'll come after me. And she hung up. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I click on the link. It's a Frank report. I'm reading through it. They're talking about branded slaves, sex slaves, DOS, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a secret organization. And I'm like, yeah, this just doesn't sound right. And then I saw the word that they're asking for collateral. And it was the word collateral that went, whoop, okay, is this the same thing? And I had this wave wash over me. So it was almost like, I want to say it was myself literally had probably been out of my body for a long time and came back in and said, wake the hell up, because it was this wave that came from the left and literally took over my body and just said, Keith Raniere is evil. And then it went through and I thought, what was that? Oh, that can't be true. Keith's not evil. Oh my gosh, he created this amazing curriculum. He's the smartest man one of the smartest men in the world. He's a humanitarian. This cannot be true. So I called the person that was asking me to come into this organization and I said, is this what you were talking about? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. So that was like the moment that the crack happened and the light started coming through. And then over a period of time, I made a lot of phone calls. Nobody really wanted to talk about it because everybody was scared. I did manage to get a few people that I could get some information from. And nobody had the full picture, by the way. Nobody had all the information. Everybody had bits and parts. Most people were afraid to talk about it. So over a period of probably a few months, somebody sent me a book called Take Back Your Life, and it's by Janja Lalich. And it, in the first 2 chapters, it outlined what a cult is. And I read through the outline. It was only one, the first chapter is all I ever read. And I realized I was in a cult. And I took the book and I threw it across the room. And I literally started like jumping up and down, going, oh my God, I was in a cult. Oh my God, I was in a cult. It just, that's when the moment actually was like kaboom. So there was a process. And then from that moment on, when I had that realization, I let it settle. And then I sent my note and said, I'm no longer affiliated with NXIVM, to the NXIVM administration. And I was done. And then that's when the process of basically deprogramming myself, getting myself deprogrammed started.
And what's that process looked like for you specifically?
Well, I was able to get a hold of Janja. I have her book right here, actually. So this is the book that saved my life, right there.
Thank you for showing me that.
Yeah, she's great. So I was able to talk to her through, so Seduced, when Cecilia Peck asked me to be in her documentary, I originally said no. And then we chatted quite a bit. And then I really trusted her. She encouraged me to bring my voice forward about my experiences, because not a lot of people wanted to talk about it. So I did. And through that process, I met Janja, and she helped me a lot to understand what had happened to me. I also had a tapping therapist named Robin, who helped me really understand, like in my body, what had happened, because I still was like, this wasn't really a cult, was it? Like, it couldn't have been. And so she helped me to like actually get to that and release a lot of it. So between Janja and Robin and another therapist named Rachel Bernstein, who also has a podcast, and she helps survivors as well. Between the three of them, I was able to start the healing process and really dig deep, even deeper actually, and start lifting some of the stuff that I had even before I got into the cult. So in a way, that was all a gift as well.
Yeah. And I asked because you mentioned spirituality, and I feel like I read that you had a background in homeopathic. Was that correct?
Mm-hmm. So I
Are
have a
there
degree in homeopathy. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Are there any other are there any alternative medicine kind of things or tools that you found to be useful in your healing process that you want to talk about at all? Or
Homeopathy was somewhat helpful, even though when I was practicing, I did mostly practice on emotional trauma. That's how I would get into the body. I'm also a Reiki master teacher, and so I used some Reiki as well. And I use a lot of flower essences and also essential oils in the process of supporting the body. A lot of juicing and things like that. Those were all things that I had gotten away from when I was in NXIVM. I had a very big practice where I was practicing energy medicine at the time, and they discouraged it a lot. And so I eventually did let that practice go, but that was after I got out of the cult. And the reason I let it go was because I really felt that I needed to work on myself and get myself back to a place where I could work with people in the best way possible.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Are there any flower essences or essential oils that have been specifically beneficial to your personal healing process? This isn't medical advice.
No,
I
no.
say to the general room,
No,
but that you personally have been very thankful for.
Yes. So I think lavender is one of the most amazing uh, essential oils on so many levels. It's calming, it's nurturing, it smells amazing. Frankincense is another, very spiritual, very helps to go inside. Um, and I really do love Bach's rescue remedy. It's 5 different,
God,
yeah,
I've got this
it's the
right.
best. Yeah, it really is. And I use it with my animals too. It really is amazing. So it's all like this support. Homeopathy, there was some support with aconite and things like that, which is for shock and things. So I just sort of was my own uh, support system when that came about, sort of using that. And I've always used that for years and years. I've been using lots of different, you see my cupboard is just full. And I think for each person, it's very personal what works for them. But I cannot talk highly enough about Bach Rescue Remedy. It's and Peri Yolanda as well. I don't know if you're familiar with Peri Yolanda.
No, I'm not.
It's similar essences. They come from the East Coast. There's a farm. They have their own sort of rescue remedy as well. They call it something else. But it does work with our energetic system, and we are all energy. And so to be able to, that's why Tai Chi is so great, to break up those blocks. So it's breaking up the blocks and supporting the system and the DNA and everything. That's for me, that really works.
Yeah. I remember when I was having, I think, the most acute PTSD symptoms in my life. I had that spray of the rescue remedy, and that
Mhm.
was a great help to me during that time.
It's amazing. And the
Yeah.
drops are great too, depending on what you're doing, especially for animals. They also make it they make one for animals with no alcohol.
Yeah, you mentioned the documentary. I wanted to ask, you had said you said no at first, and then you kind of talked um to them more and felt more comfortable. I did want to ask, was that an empowering experience for you? What was it like? And how did working on the documentary affect you?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't want my voice out there. I didn't want to be exposed. I was so embarrassed still, still working through some of the healing. I hadn't met Yanya yet, so um, it was very scary to me. And I'd never really been on a set. So I learned a lot, which was great for me. But Cecilia and the crew were all female, and they were so supportive and so careful with us to make sure that we weren't being re-traumatized or that we were okay every step of the way, and very calming. And so in the beginning, I was very nervous and didn't know what to do. But then after a period of time, I started feeling more comfortable and I started really trusting them. And then when it came out, I've only seen it once, and that was at the screening. um, I was petrified when it came out. And so I was like, oh my God, it's actually coming out. So it's sort of like, Kelly, you either have to own it now or you just run like hell. So what are you going to do? And so I thought, well, it's out now. It's coming out. I have an IMDb page now. You better just freaking own it. And so I did. And it was in the owning of my story.
Mm.
Um, that the sort of like that last part of that healing really kicked in, because now I can talk about it. Now I'm not embarrassed about it. It's out there. There's nothing I can do. So it did sort of almost force me to accept it on a different level.
That's really interesting. Thank you for saying that. Wow. Yeah, that part of it just hadn't even occurred to me.
It's
Um,
crazy when you actually have something out there that anyone has access to. It's a very interesting, vulnerable feeling. It is
I
kind of scary.
I did want to ask, because there was so much media attention.
Mhm.
I did
Mhm.
want to ask how the media attention that was on all this, not just from the documentary, but also like it being a story. I wanted to ask how that has affected you and your healing process,
Well,
or
in the
your life
beginning,
in general.
in general, it was sort of like I would call a few people that I could talk to that were out of the cult and say, "Can you believe this is happening? Like, can you believe we're here right now? Can you believe this story is running?" There was this almost like little dripping effect of a little bit more acknowledgement, a little bit more believing, a little bit more, because it was such a big story. Everybody heard about it. It was just we're this little organization of maybe 400 or 500 of us regular coaches in the community, not that big. And this thing was like, I was in the airport, and there was this huge, I forget what journal it was, Rolling Stone or something, in the airport. And there's a picture of Allison Mack on it. And I was like, this was in the very beginning. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, it was just unbelievable. It was really hard to take it all in. So over the period of what's been almost 3 years now, having talked about it and done the documentary and lots of interviews and writing my book, now it's like, okay, this shit's real. Like, it happened. And it's just part of life. It's just part of my experience in life. And
Yeah,
but it was definitely surreal. That's a good word.
that's actually the word that was coming to my mind as well. Yeah, it does sound like an extremely surreal experience.
And lonely too. Really lonely, because there weren't that many people that I could talk to who were out, but willing to talk and be honest and connected. Everybody ran ran for the hills, and some people were half in, half out. Some people were out. Some people were in. Some people didn't want to talk about it. Some people just, there was lots of different views on it.
Mm-hmm. How it seemed like you were put in touch with other people who had exited through the documentary. Do you still stay in touch with other people who have exited? Do you support each other, or for the most part
Yeah,
have a
I
lot of you
knew
drawn
all
away
of
from
them.
each other?
Yeah, I knew all of them already, except for oh my goodness, not Cecilia. What was her name? Oh my goodness. Anyway, she was the one who had been traumatized with the EM. I only met her once, and she's from Mexico. Everyone else I knew, and we do still stay in touch. Yes.
How has this affected the way that you trust, or your experience with trust or intuition?
So from the very beginning, after figuring out what kind of mistake I'd made, I didn't trust anybody for a long time. I didn't, and it was very hard to trust Cecilia in the documentary. But as my intuition started to come back, as I started, and I physically brought that back, I made a huge intent to bring it back. It took a little while. It's always been there, didn't go anywhere, but I had to start trusting it again. And so when I started trusting my intuition, I started trusting my ability to trust people. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So that's how that went. But in the very beginning, for a few months, I didn't trust anyone. I didn't even trust myself. I didn't trust myself with anything. So it was very difficult.
Yeah. Do you have any specific advice for survivors who are having a hard time learning how to trust themselves again, or trust their own intuition?
I think yes. And I really fully believe we all have intuition. Every single person on this planet has intuition. And it's like a muscle, and we need to use it. And we need to trust that we can trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We need to trust that we can trust ourselves. We know better than anyone else what's right and wrong for us. We know what's right and wrong. Everybody knows, but a lot of times we go against ourselves for something else. Like, I'm going to go against myself because I don't want to hurt this person, or I'm going to go against myself because I want something else. And so being really self-aware of that, and just being self-aware of yourself and your decisions and your thought process and why you're doing things, that self-awareness and that brutal honesty with yourself is the most important thing, I think, to healing yourself and getting yourself to a place where you are okay with you in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And not minimizing victimization at all, because that will never go away. But we have to move on, and we have to start trusting ourselves again and start being the person that we know that's in there, and we're okay with that. And so I think that's the best advice I can give. It's not easy. It is not easy coming out of something like this. And the
Mm-hmm.
other advice I would give is to reach out. There's at seduceddocumentary.com. If you go on that website, there is an area that has resources and help. So all the people that I'm talking about, Yanya Lalich and Rachel, they're all on that website. And I believe that there is an organization called FACT, I think, that actually will help people find resources and sometimes supplement some of that cost. It's
Thank you for telling me that.
seduceddocumentary.com.
I'm going to make sure that that's linked in episode notes so that people can easily access those resources. Thank you. And if there are any other resources that you would like linked in episode notes, yes, I wrote that down. I'm going to make sure to link that as well. That's wonderful because I had other people who have had experiences, that are specifically asking some questions like that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And another question from a listener is, do you have any advice for friends or family who are hoping to support a loved one in exiting a cult?
So what I have been told through people who do deprogramming and things like that, it's a very difficult thing. And I think, so I'll talk from my experience, from my friends that knew I was in a cult or were thinking I was in a cult and didn't know what to do. It's interesting. All of them said to me, and I think it really was true, that they didn't want to lose touch with me. So they kept that connection, even though I was going further and further. They didn't want to scare me away. And they probably would have had they made a big fuss about me then thinking I was in a cult, because there was part of me that was cult girl, Orange County girl, and NXIVM girl. And I kept them separate. And so if I were talking to you and I realized that you're kind of onto it maybe, or you're not into it, then I would change the subject and I would be Orange County girl. And then if I thought you were interested, I would be this other person that was, helping to enroll you into the organization because I wanted to help and things like that. So my friends were starting to think that the cult girl was kind of taking over. And they all told me we didn't want to lose contact with you. So I think the most important thing for someone who is in a cult, if you're trying to help someone get out of a cult, rather, for you, is to not lose contact with that person. Don't judge it, don't attack it, and get some professional help, because there are people who do interventions. There are people who can help you to navigate these waters, because they're very, very tricky. But just don't lose contact with the person, because you never know. The person may have an awakening where they realize that they're want out, and they're going to need someone to go to. They're going to need to be able to know they can call you and for help. So it's I think it's just really critical to keep some type of communication with the person without triggering them to pull away.
That's great advice. Thank you. And it's hard too. Especially if somebody is into something that's very upsetting to outsiders, to the judgment aspect of it. I can definitely see that, how all of a sudden someone could reach that point where they're perhaps looking for an exit and realize that maybe all their loved ones are gone, or they've had experiences where they've felt judged, or they would be afraid of judgment, and all of a sudden maybe even sink deeper because they felt completely alone and like they had no other options.
Exactly. And many times people who are in cults lose contact with the outside world. So they will break ties with many people. And then when they come to this place where they may want to get out, they don't have anywhere to go, or they feel they have nowhere to go, because I'm sure the people their friends and family would take them back immediately, but they feel very alone. And that's a very scary place to be.
Did you feel that that the organization tried to isolate you or separate you from your loved ones?
It was done in a very obscure way. It was more sort of like, it kept you so busy doing things that need to be done inside the organization, and they discouraged they discouraged the community from sort of communicating and fraternizing with people who didn't get it, basically. So there was
Mm-hmm.
a very much an us and a them component to it. I have children, so I wasn't able to, there was always that mother part of me that was pulling me back. So, and I think that that's what part of the thing that really kept my kids out of it. I kept, some of my older kids went and did a few days of curriculum, but more or less I kind of kept them kind of out of it. There was a level mama in me that was, the intuition was there, and I was just like kind of keeping that separate. And I write about that in my book because there's a lot of guilt around that. I have a lot of guilt that I think a lot of mothers out there can relate to, maybe not through a cult, but through other things that take them away, whatever that might be, take them away a little bit emotionally or physically even. And I think that's a very universal thing. I experienced it in a different way, but writing about it definitely helped me to process that.
Yeah. And you'd said something earlier, and you talked about and you just mentioned guilt, and then earlier you had mentioned feeling embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk about the feeling of embarrassment or the experience of guilt, and those really difficult feelings, and how you've been working on those.
So I still have, so my book is called Unapologetically Glorious, Owning Your Story Without Shame or Blame. I'm working on that. I think everyone's a work in progress. We're all working toward being better people, at least people that are listening to your podcast, I'm assuming. But I think most people are working toward that. And I still feel a little embarrassed when people find out that I've been in a cult, because the word cult has such a connotation of Charles Manson and dead chickens and murders and all this really awful stuff. And I'm not saying that NXIVM didn't have bad stuff, because it did, but there's still a part of me that feels a little embarrassed. And when it does come up, I tell myself, I said, everyone makes mistakes. Every human on this planet has made a mistake. And if the person judging me or I feel is judging me can't see that, well, that's not for me to teach them. It's for me to teach myself that it's okay to not always be okay, and it's okay to make mistakes. And if you're learning from those mistakes and you're moving through those mistakes, not everybody's going to like me. Not everyone's going to like me, and I'm starting to really be okay with that idea. It's okay. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people do like me, and I like a lot of people, but some people don't. And a lot of times I look at it too, it's a reflection of them. It's really a reflection of where they're coming from. So if I'm looking to someone else to show me my self-esteem, it's kind of crazy because my self-esteem is here. And if I'm looking over there to validate it, it's like a broken mirror reflecting back to me something that isn't even real. And so I struggle with that. I work on that all the time, because to own your story, you got to own it all. And I'm working on that.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about your book.
Thank you. So my book is coming out very soon. It's actually in the formatting process right now. It'll be available on Amazon. And it's really a blueprint of my journey through my life and what I have learned. And I have a Kellyism sort of at the bottom of each chapter that kind of encapsulates exactly what I learned. And it's very vulnerable. It's written about real people in real time. It's the real me. And it covers things like guilt and vulnerability and making mistakes and death and grief and all the things that are human, the experiences that we all can relate to. It's just my specific experience. And so I'm hoping to be able to help at least one person see themselves a little bit enough to realize that at the end of the day, we don't need anyone or anything to tell us how to be. There's nothing outside of ourselves, no one person or one thing that is the answer. The answer is right here. Now, it's easy to say that, but through my experiences, this like a blueprint of my journey, I was able to sort of put that on paper for me. So it was really a healing process for me that I'm hoping I can share with other people that will be helpful.
I'm so glad that that writing that has been such a powerful experience for you, and I think you're right. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
It was
Uh,
very cathartic for me. I had hired, this is a kind of a funny story. So I had hired someone in the beginning of COVID to do it. And it didn't really work. It was a man and he was great, but he did country Western biographies and so it didn't work. So then I hired someone else to do it and it didn't work either. And so I called my publicist. I was so upset and I'm like, gosh. So she said, why don't you try this format? So I tried it and I did it and I just whipped it out in 8 weeks.
wow,
It was writing all day, every day. And
that
that
is
was it.
so
I was
intense.
just obsessed and nothing could get, in this way. And I had these blocks of time and I was writing and I got it done. And it was so cathartic for me. Uh, I can't even tell you. I cried for like 2 weeks after, just off and on, off and on, off and on, because everything had come up. And then it was all sort of just, okay, going out through the tears. Okay, going out through the tears.
Wow.
So yeah, it was an amazing process for me.
If you had to pinpoint something that you feel made it possible for you to get it out, to make that work, to write it yourself, what was that for you?
Oh, that's a great question.
Was it like the format that your publicist kind of
I think
offered to you,
the
or
format was good. It was more when I had a concrete sort of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It almost came through me. Like I can't explain it, but it almost came from somewhere else
I know
because
exactly
I
what
was
you're talking about.
remembering things that I didn't even remember I remembered, and moments and things and feelings, and being able to go in and write about your true self, the vulnerability of rejection, or the feeling of being in a coffee shop when a new friend you think is going to meet you for coffee and they don't show up. What is that, that feeling? So it was came through me because I decided I wanted to share this with someone. I wanted other people to know they're not alone
Mhm.
because I have felt so alone my whole life.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And I want to thank you. Like that was really powerful, and I'm like wow. Oh, I would also like to ask about the work that you're doing in the world. I wanted to ask about Be Glorious.
Yes. So Be Glorious is a platform that I'm starting to just to help people understand that we are all born glorious. We are born as babies. We are glorious, and through our lives, through our belief system, from what people tell us, from what we experience, we start to lose that over time. But it doesn't go anywhere. And I really want to help people to rediscover that gloriousness about themselves, that unique, beautiful light that we all have, that in this world right now is really being covered up. And part of the reason I wrote this book was just to hopefully build a community of people that understand this, that we are the light. It is here, it isn't out there. We have everything we need right here. And we are glorious beings on this planet. Every single solitary one of us is a glorious being. So that is what I'm working on now. Yeah, I think the platform itself is still in its sort of infancy stages right now after finishing the book, and I'm hoping that it can be a place for people to see themselves and to be able to reclaim themselves, basically. And I think that with the book kind of going along with it, which will explain a lot of it. It's not a how-to book. This
Mhm.
is really my experience type of book. So it's not a step by step. But from this book, and I think from the platform, there will be enough information for people to start that journey for themselves.
Mhm.
And I think that we need things like this on the planet. We need places for people to go. We need more to love each other. We are all connected, and we need this for the planet. We need to raise the vibration of the planet in order to save ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, this is the perfect time to ask about your spiritual practice and how that's been a part of your life or your healing journey, and if you'd like to share anything about that.
So I know I meditate. I'm not great at it. I don't do it, every morning. I meditate throughout my week. I have a very strong connection with what I call God. Now, a lot of people might call it source or universe. A very strong connection with that, and it's a work. It's work in terms of its practice. Like I'm constantly reconnecting with source, with God's source, because that is everything. And my spiritual practice is, I've finally learned over a period of time that it's really between me and source, me and God. That's really what it is. And I hand everything over. And when it's out of my league and I'm feeling anxious or nervous or upset, I hand it over. And I don't necessarily get the answer right away, but what I do get is peace.
Mm.
And that peace is enough to quiet me down, enough to see the signs, enough to hear the message, enough to listen to myself. And so that's really my practice. I no longer go outside myself looking to, I love Yogananda. I love Ram Dass. I love what he has to say. I really wish I would have been able to meet him. But I don't follow anyone. I simply listen, take what makes sense to me, run it through my filter. Does it resonate? And then I if it's useful, I use it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really about my connection, and it's an ongoing, almost like a telephone call. It's a constant communication. If you love your best friend, you're going to call her or him. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I love that. I had an auntie in India, and instead of handing it over, the word she would always use was "send it up."
Yes. Yes.
And I've always remembered that, and I always think of her and think of it in that way of "send it up," and
Exactly.
yeah,
It's amazing the peace that comes from that when you hand it over and realize it's kind of out of my hands and I can't control this. It's really quite beautiful, I think.
yeah. Well, and I love the way you put it too, because it wasn't. I think when some people hear that said, they think of it as someone, uh, you know, kind of like a loss of autonomy kind of thing. Well, like, well, I'm not even in control, but I love the way you put it, because it does open you up. Like once you hand it over or send it up, it I love that you mentioned it opening you up and to kind of hear things, and because that's actually the way I feel about it, which is that it allows me to make better decisions. So there's no loss of autonomy or or control or necessarily. It's just it is like a clarity or a peace that allows
Mhm.
me to act from a different place.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think if you slow down and have peace, you can respond instead of react. And I think it's in
Yes.
their response that we're able to, hmm, maybe instead of being angry at this person, I could have compassion or I could try to understand what they're going through. Or you can have much different responses that come from a place of love because trust me, like I have knee jerk reactions all the time, but I'm learning to slow down and I'm learning to respond instead of react. And I'm learning to respond with love, unconditional love, even though I'm being hurt. I'm not being abused. I'm saying just my feelings are hurt or
Yeah.
whatever, or feeling anxious. And so I don't want to respond out of being anxious. I want
Yeah.
to respond from a place of, somewhere else.
Yeah. But I do want to ask about meditation and what your meditation practice is like.
So what I found extremely beneficial is Headspace. It's an app.
Mm.
I think you can actually get a free trial still. Headspace is a very short meditation. It's probably 5 to 7 minutes long and works you up to 10 minutes. and it kind of really shows you the effects that meditation can actually have on the brain scientifically. And then you can buy other, you can upgrade to longer meditations. So that's where I started meditating when I really got serious about it. And now sometimes I use Headspace. Sometimes I listen to Joe Dispenza, who is also has some really great meditations that go sort of helping to heal the world. It goes very between it's very global, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And other times I meditate just by myself. I sit quietly and I work with my breath, and I just watch. You can't stop your thoughts, but you can watch them go by and go, well, that one was interesting. Isn't that interesting? And keep focusing on the breath. And when you get away from the breath, you go back to the breath. And as the thoughts come in, because they will, you just go, just like a car going by. Whew, there it goes. And then go
Mm-hmm.
back to the breath. And just keep doing that as many times as you need to over a period of time. It is very calming. It also, you will notice, well, at least I noticed during the day later on, I'm much more calm. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have that monkey brain going off all the time, arguing with myself.
Mm-hmm. That's the phrase that I learned as well, was the monkey mind, and
Hmm.
it is it is real.
Hmm.
But
Well, our brain can't not think.
yeah.
It can't stop, but we can learn to not listen to the thoughts that come in. They're just going by, like, there goes a red car. Do I want a red car today? No, I don't think so. Oh, here comes a yellow car. Okay, I'll take that one. That thought's okay. So you can decide which thoughts make sense to you and which ones you want to take in and which ones you don't,
Mm-hmm.
after a period of time of learning to that. And that's all about awareness, right? So mindfulness and awareness comes through meditation.
Yeah.
One way. That's the one way that it does.
Well, and also just learning not to. I think that's a big misconception about meditation, is that the goal is to not think, and I think that's what turns a lot of people off if they're trying to just get into meditation, because they'll sit down, they'll all of a sudden be faced with the monkey minds, and they're like, well, I can't do this, and it's because it is impossible to not think.
Hmm.
It's just not, it's not that's not what it is. um but yeah, I love the one, the practice of envisioning self as the mountain and the thoughts as clouds.
Hmm.
That's one that I found really helpful at one point. But yeah, I also find it very have found it in my life very beneficial in terms of not identifying too much with your thoughts. We have so many thoughts, and it's very easy to over identify with them, like, oh, I this is who I am, this is what I am. And no, you can have thoughts, and that's not necessarily what you are, who you are. They just happen, and you know that you don't have to over identify with it. um
Exactly. It's a
yeah.
choice, right? It's
Yeah.
a choice. You get to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I uh just two more questions. One is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
Um, I think really just especially people who have been in organizations that are high control, high demand. There are a lot of organizations out now that are there to help, like yourself. There's also I Got Out on Instagram. I Got Out, yes.
Okay.
They're very much about helping survivors. So there's a lot of information, and now, especially now, over the last year and a half, and a lot of resources for people. And really, what I want to get across is you're not alone. There are so many people who have brushed with a cult or have been full on in a cult and have experienced way worse than I ever did inside NXIVM. So there's a big range of experiences for people, but it doesn't minimize any of it. And there are organizations, and I really encourage anyone who has had this experience to reach out to seduceddocumentary.com, to I Got Out, any places like that, to help yourself to start the healing process and know you're not alone. And this does happen. It took me a long time to believe it's actually happened to me. It took forever for me to wrap my head around this happened. But it does happen, and it happens to good people, and it happens to normal people, and it happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're dumb, and it doesn't mean that you're naive. It doesn't mean that.
Yes.
It can happen to anyone given the right set of circumstances. And for me, I was in a very vulnerable place in my life where I was really, really searching. And I believed and trusted that this was going to work. And I didn't use my filter like I always have. I just didn't do it. And it was just, it was like a perfect storm.
I loved something that you said in the documentary was, I believe you said that, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry if I misquote, but that you believed that you had been targeted because you were intelligent and well-connected.
That's correct. Different organizations are going after different things, but if you think about an organization, what does it need? It needs resources, whether that be people, money, power, what have you. And if you can offer that, not that I went in offering that, but they figured it out, and that was they were attracted to me for that reason. And that's why I was really pushed up the Stripe Paths, which was the organization's inside coaching thing. That's why I was pushed up so quickly and brought in so quickly and met Keith so soon. Within my first couple of weeks, I met Keith. And so I was being treated very special, and that felt good. Why wouldn't it feel good?
Yeah.
So those are things to look out for. And they are looking for people that can help them, whether it just be a worker bee. I was everything. I was a worker bee too. I worked my butt off. So they're looking for everything, and they want resources, whether it be your manpower, person power, or what have you.
Do you have anything that you want to say to the survivors who are listening?
I think just know you're not alone and reach out. There are organizations out there. I just really think it's important for people to know there's resources, and that there are people who want to help. And your podcast, they're in the right place right now.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Still got a lot of imposter syndrome with what I do. So I'm so glad that that you're here, and that I just feel really honored to get to talk to you, and thank you so much for doing this, and for sharing so much of yourself and your experiences, and for offering these incredible resources as well, and helping make them more available to people who need them, who are feeling alone. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really delightful, and I loved meeting you, and thank you for what you're doing. And
thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. This has been wonderful, and I'm just so happy I got to meet you and to create this together. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Your heart is a muscle the size of your fist. Keep on loving, keep on fighting, and hold on, and hold on.